there you go. You've been officially warned. And now I think I share screen. Oh my goodness, I got too many screens open. Well, let's pick one.
See, Homer and I were in the same uh, boarding house.
Oh, really?
Soto,
Yeah, in Soto House.
Soto House. Yeah, one of the people I saw um, was Rick Seifert up in
Hmm.
Medford. He was in Soto with us.
Wow, that's interesting. Rick Seifert and I have a very close friend. As a matter of fact, this is the guy that introduced me and ICO together, Michael Fullerton.
Oh,
So I've been in contact with him recently. Yeah, okay. So here we go. Let's get started. It looks like we've got going to successfully reboot. We got enough people showing up. And here's one more. Um, Hi, Harold. Welcome. Just in time. So I'm basically going to turn it over to Bob. Are we in agreement, Bob? You're taking over?
Um, yes, I arguably in agreement. This will
Well,
be this will be
arguably, I have evidence that at one point you were enough agreement to send me some slides. So take it away, Bob.
well, yeah, this is just a very brief show and tell. I was in Denmark with my wife, and then had the occasion to meet my sister in Krakow in Poland. She was there with her husband for a long weekend. So I said, okay, I'm coming down. So I took an infamous Ryanair flight where you pay more for the seat than you do for the flight. Um, and then, and then, of course, then you pay just as much again to bring a bag on board. It's a brilliant airline. The only thing you don't pay for is to go to the bathroom. I mean, I don't know. I didn't try it. I didn't see a coin slot there. I didn't take a lot of photographs. John asked for some photographs. I hadn't been to Krakow for 50 years. I was there when it was long, long, long behind the Iron Curtain. There were not many tourists. This is a picture of me and my sister at the what's always in all these old Central European cities is always an old Jewish cemetery, which is very popular amongst tourists these days. This is the old Jewish cemetery in Krakow. Krakow, yeah, this dates from about 1535. All the tombstones there, you might ask, well, how come they survived the Second World War? Well, they didn't. They were hauled away and used as paving stones. But then after the war, there was a lot of renovation, and the tombstones were rescued or were reestablished. There's one famous one from, I think, 15 something, of a particular rabbi. I don't know his name, but he was a Talmudist and wrote many of the laws that the Hasidic sect of Jews follow today. And believe me, there are a lot of laws, I hear. We actually met some Hasidic Jews from Jerusalem at the tombstone of that rabbi, just by coincidence, because Hasidic Jews do tend to come there to like a visit to Lourdes in a way, because it's one of the most important rabbis in that sect. And now you can visit his tombstone, which was actually not damaged in the war. The first photograph that John's put up, there's only about 3 photographs, don't worry, was because as we arrived, we did a guided tour of the old Jewish quarter. The Jewish quarter was just, even before the Second World War, was only, I mean, it was principally Jewish, I suppose, but Krakow itself was a pretty Jewish city. 30% of the population, 70,000 of 280,000 or so I guess a quarter of the population was Jewish. We went the next day, I think it was, or day after, to Auschwitz. My brother-in-law, my sister's husband, would not go. He's the son of 2 Austrian Jews who made it out from Vienna in time in 1939. But when you go to a concentration camp, we've already seen it so many times. We know the horrors. I learned a few things, but before I get onto Auschwitz in about a minute, what's the next? I just would say that the highlight of the visit to the Jewish quarter was the fact that all the Jewish restaurants, if they existed before the Second World War, are kind of back there again. So you can get a great lunch and a good half liter of Polish beer to wash it down in. What's the next photograph, John? Oh yes, there we are having lunch. And of course behind is one of the many small synagogues on the main square there. Move on to the next one. That's my brother-in-law in the back. This is the highlight. Chopped liver, herring, gefilte fish. I mean, it's wonderful stuff. And of course, there are hundreds and thousands of tourists. You could argue, I suppose, that the representation of Jewish life today for tourists is a bit of a pastiche, but enjoyable all the same. Is there another photograph? I can't remember.
No, you just sent me 3.
Okay, well, I'll just finish off with the fact that why my sister chose Krakow for a long weekend. First of all, it's very convenient to fly out of England, where my sister lives, and just go anywhere in Europe for the weekend. But I've been back for 3 or 4 days, bumped into a neighbor yesterday. He says, "Where have you been?" I said, "Poland." He said, "Why'd you go to Poland?" I said, "Oh, I went to Krakow." He said, "What's there?" I said, "It's an amazing city." He said, "It is?" And I didn't push to go into more detail about Krakow being the ancient capital of the Polish, of Poland, that it then became the capital of Poland, the Poland-Lithuanian Commonwealth, which was probably the largest country in Europe at one point. Because I realized that when people go on vacations, Americans go on vacations, and don't take this the wrong way, to Europe, I think the focus is largely Italy and France, Spain, and the idea possibly, and the Danube, I guess, cruises, the Rhine cruise, but to go to what many would figure to be an obscure old city in Eastern Europe doesn't hold a lot of attraction. And yet Krakow is one of the more beautiful cities in Europe. It did not get damaged in the Second World War. It has a magnificent Gothic cathedral with I guess it's called a pentateuch, not a triptych, but a pentateuch, a 5-door or 5-painting altar, not painting, wood carving, the largest and finest oak wood carving with all the Christian figures in Europe. Around the corner in the old palace of a nobleman is a wonderful art museum in which you will find one of the only 4 portraits of women painted by Leonardo da Vinci. This one being, you know of one, Mona Lisa, of course. This one is a portrait of a lady with an ermine, and it's in this house, and it's beautifully presented. Then you can go to a candlelit Chopin concert, because obviously Chopin is the #1 attraction for Poland. We went also to a classical music recital in the church opposite the hotel. We also went to the salt mine. The salt mines, as John will attest, are extraordinary. They date back about 800 years when mining was started. They now descend 1,000 feet. They're no longer mining salt. That stopped about 30 years ago, because you don't need to mine salt now to make money, since they have 1 million tourists a year, each paying about $50. Work out the revenue. But there are 4 chapels carved out deep underground. One is enormous. It has also carved artworks representing copies. There's Leonardo's Last Supper carved out of rock salt. It's a wonderful visit. finally, I'll mention Auschwitz. What I did learn was that Auschwitz, actually, Auschwitz number one, I didn't know, had been a Polish prisoner of war camp after it had been a Polish barracks in the 20s and 30s. So in 39, it became a Polish prisoner of war camp, and then it was in middle of 1942 onwards when Western European Jews were removed. They were sent to Auschwitz II, at which point Auschwitz I, at which point Auschwitz II, which is otherwise known as Birkenau, 3 kilometers from Auschwitz I, was constructed. And that became the labor camp for about 100,000 people that survived the separation on arrival by train at the newly built railway tracks and station platform at Birkenau. It is vast, even though people obviously were crowded into awful accommodations there. You cannot see the end of that camp. Was I moved? Yes, I was moved. I was shocked by the size of it. Most impressed I was, though, with the tourists, young people, schools. I think it's useful. I think the Poles have every right, and the Germans are equally okay with it, that the horrors of the Second World War, one of these horrors, is pointed out. There's magnificent new architecture at the entry point in a sort of brutalist concrete style. It's an extraordinary museum. Anyway, we were there 3 days, and I went back to Copenhagen. Questions? Are there any questions? This is complicated, John, because you don't see anybody when the photograph is up. By the way, we went down. We had a second lunch in the Jewish Quarter. Same lunch. Recommended.
Okay, let's see. I can see people if they raise their hands.
Well, I'm not asking them to raise their hands. I just would finish off actually with a final comment on the neighbor who said, my thoughts about it when he said, why go to Poland? Where is it? What is there to see there? Is what crossed my mind was, well, Ukraine is next door, to which the response might be, I suppose, what's Ukraine got to do with us?
Oh boy. Oh boy. Yeah, Harold.
Bob, could you describe the meal on the plate? I'm seeing chopped liver, and a strawberry and maybe a lemon wedge. But what else?
Oh no, that's beetroot sauce with horseradish. Red blob. That's you can have. Well, that's to be had with the gefilte fish. The gefilte fish you can't quite see because it's under a mound of fat. But there are fish balls under that. And now I've forgotten what is on the top of the dish there. It's a baked good with some cream on it, and now I can't remember what it was. To the bottom left is the marinated herring with cream and onions, delicious, and then you've got chopped liver with more horseradish, chopped liver shaped in balls at the front, bottom, center. Yes.
Great, thank you.
Interesting.
I mean, you can get it at any deli, any Jewish deli in New York or Los Angeles, but there you are.
Yeah, there you are. Other questions for Bob?
Yeah, I've got one.
Bruce, hi.
This is Bruce. Yeah. Speaking of Auschwitz, we just saw a play at Berkeley Rep a few months ago, and it was called "And Then There Were Blueberries," and it had to do with the commandants of Auschwitz, and basically how the guys that ran Auschwitz were he was a commandant and also the director of Auschwitz, and it had to do with how these guys everything was wonderful during the day, and how they had their families outside the gate, and everything was was really great. And then, of course, when you went inside where these guys worked, I mean, it was a whole different scene. and that was a very it was sort of remarkable. Um, it was based on a true story of this guy in coming across his records. So yeah,
Yes, you're talking about Rudolf Höss, not Hess, but Höss. And he was actually recently the subject of a very good movie called Zone of Interest, a German movie which was nominated for an Oscar actually only just last year. And it's about the Rudolf Höss's family who lived in a house just outside the wall.
yeah,
And he would go to work every day and then come home to a house which was like a house in a suburb of a German city. I mean, just to remind you, Auschwitz is in Poland. Rudolf Höss ended up being hanged in front of the first crematorium in 1946, I think.
oh,
Uh, and as you walk by the barracks, which is Auschwitz number one, just 100 yards away behind the wall, you can see the house, the 2-story or 3-story house that he lived in, and and obviously the family, including young children, could smell Auschwitz, could see the smoke.
yeah.
The movie is Zone of Interest.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, interesting. We saw that play too, Bruce, and it's put together like a mystery. You get little pieces out of scrapbooks, really old photograph books that were found, and you see the picture, and one more picture is added to the puzzle, and pretty soon you get this horrific overall pastiche of what the hell was going on. It was very well done.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Then there were blueberries.
Yep. Yep. Very good. I don't think it can't still be playing, but look for it if it comes back
Yeah.
around.
I mentioned earlier that I wasn't shocked. I mean, I should have said I wasn't surprised. I have seen so much of concentration camps. I've seen
yeah,
the Holocaust museums in Washington, in Berlin, in Copenhagen. So, I knew about it all. It's it's 50 years that I've been seeing it and hearing about it and watching movies, etc. So it's difficult to be shocked or surprised anymore. I think the thing to remember is what we're all capable of doing when we let authoritarianism creep in. And on the subject of allowing German authoritarianism to creep in, I'm also reading, as if I can't get enough of those times, the diaries of Victor Klemperer, which were only published in the 1990s. He was a Jewish professor of French literature in Dresden, and because he had a non-Jewish wife, he survived. He was never arrested. Well, he was arrested briefly for a few days for a minor criminal offense of not keeping the blackout going at his home in Dresden. But he kept diaries almost daily from 1933 to 1945. And the description of his daily life, you see things happening at an incredibly slow pace. And then 1 year in, 36, 37, 38, he looks back at the end of every year and compares the end of that year to the end of the year before, and is astounded himself by what has happened to his freedoms in just the course of that 1 year. It's a remarkable piece of literature by Victor Klemperer, who's a first cousin of Otto Klemperer.
Uh-huh. I'd add one more piece of literature. It's a book called Return to Sender, and it's a fictional description of a correspondence between a man in San Francisco who's an art dealer and his German contact, I think is also in Dresden. And it starts in 1933, and you can see this slippery slope It's chilling. It is really chilling. Return to sender. Okay, anybody else have a question?
Yes, I have a question about the Krakow Jewish quarter. I've been to the Prague Jewish quarter, and it sounded very similar. I wonder if Robert had been to Prague's Jewish quarter.
You're muted.
Oh, sorry.
No, I had muted myself. Yes.
Oh.
Thank you. Yes, I've been to Prague a number of times, starting in 1973, and I've visited the old Jewish quarter there numerous times. Not for the last 20 years. Of course, the interesting cemetery there is at the old new. It's called the Old New Altes Neues synagogue, and that has a more spectacular set of tombstones because they were not removed during the Second World War, and some of them are several hundred years old, and they're tumbled together. The Jewish quarter in Prague is not the same or similar to the Jewish quarter in Krakow because Krakow never went through a rebuilding and realignment of streets in the same way as Haussmann did in Paris, and which Prague emulated in the late 19th century. So in fact, a large part of all the old quarters of Prague were torn down anyway, mid to late 19th century, as they sought to copy the architectural style of Haussmann in Paris. And that simply didn't happen in Krakow. So Krakow has got an ancient square surrounded with old shops and synagogues and so on. Very different experience.
Thank you.
It also features greatly. This is the other reason that tourism is so rampant in Krakow now. It's a center of Schindler's List, and Oskar Schindler's factory, enamel plate or enamel dishes factory, which is just inside what became the ghetto across the Vistula River in 1942, is a major feature of the tourist trap of Krakow. The Jewish quarter, not the ghetto, which is across the river, as I said, but the Jewish quarter is also now the main place for nightlife with its klezmer music and bars. It is a buzz of life, which I suppose is a lovely compliment to what it was at the time of the war. Aiko.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but I sort of recalled that the salt mines today are used for events. People can rent it out and have weddings and birthday
You
parties.
are absolutely right.
It's
Down
so
below,
weird.
there's a pretty big restaurant, and we didn't stop for lunch there. It's 300 feet below ground. There is an elevator, but I will tell you the elevators are. That's really the slow way of getting to the surface. I would have been quite happy to walk up the steps again. But yes, and the kitchen looked good, and there was plenty of space for a wedding reception. Oh, of course, you have the enormous cavernous chapel, where yes, that's exactly right. People are married there, and that can hold. I would guess that could hold 500 or 800 people. Less than 1,000 people, perhaps. Yeah.
We had very memorable trips. Different.
I think I remember, Aiko, when we were there, we saw a photo of Pope John Paul visiting that cathedral.
Oh, well, visitors to the mines. I mean, they've been a fascination for centuries. I got a small list here. Copernicus was a visitor. Goethe was a visitor. Chopin. Jacob Bronowski, who did the TV series Ascent of Man, it figures in his series Ascent of Man. Anybody see the Jacob Bronowski TV series Ascent of Man? Oh, it was a BBC thing. It goes back 30, 40 years. Magnificent. History of man. Yes, and Karol Wojtyła was there, John Paul II. And last and not least, Bill Clinton's been there too.
I remember when we went to the Jewish quarter in Prague, we learned that Emperor Joseph II of Austro-Hungary had been a friend of the Jews and gave them civil rights. Which reminds me, later on, my Stanford roommate, um, he was a history major, and his favorite a man in history, he was Jewish. Uh, his favorite man in history was Napoleon, because Napoleon extended what Joseph II had started and gave the Jews their full civil rights.
Oh, yes. In fact, as Napoleon marched towards Moscow, he passed through southern part of Lithuania. What was the name of the city? Oh my goodness! Give me a major city in Lithuania.
Vilnius.
Vilnius. As he went through Vilnius, he wrote back to whoever his wife was or lover was at the time. It's the Jerusalem of the North, and he was well received as he went through Vilna or Vilnius, yes, on his way to Moscow. He didn't have time for a lengthy visit on his retreat, but well,
Well, and he had fewer men, yes.
yeah.
Not like I think 10%, right? Um, okay.
I mentioned that because yes, he granted all rights, of course, to all peoples in the French, in France and beyond, wherever whichever territories were then dominated by him, and I think he took some pride in noting the vast Jewish population activity in Vilnius and in other cities as he marched through Eastern Europe.
And I might say in America, New Orleans benefited from Napoleonic law. The slaves were freed. Of course, as soon as New Orleans, Thomas Jefferson bought it from the French, the African American population reverted to slavery or left. Mostly, I guess, left, went to Haiti. Yeah. Any other questions? Fascinating stuff, Bob. I am going to see if I can advance the slide here.
Apologize for the paucity of pictures, but I didn't think it was. I didn't need to. Oh yes, well that's one I walked through that gate. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. So Eichel and this is one reason why we did this is Bob explained what he had done there, and that sparked memories of Eichel and I were there 20 years ago in Krakow, and were really had basically the same experience: Auschwitz, the salt mines, and then Krakow. But before I go on, are there any more questions for Bob? Okay, so we go to Auschwitz, which I think any Gentile should do, and I've met many Jews who just won't do it, and I certainly understand that point of view, and I'm sure Bob does too.
Yes.
And so when we came back to Krakow after a terrible, excruciating, emotionally wrought experience, we came back to Krakow, and we had an option, a menu of 6 different churches we could go to for concerts. And most of them were music by Germans. And so that gave us just a little perspective. Not
May I
that,
interrupt just briefly, John? Hold your thought there. When you put this image up, I was wondering how you got a hold of it from me, because that's exactly the church that we went to. That is exactly still the same artistic format of the announcement of the list of music which is being performed. And I haven't gone through the whole list here, but it's almost identical with what we heard. And this is
wow.
20 years later. You carry on. I would just say it was magnificent. You carry on.
Yeah, no, this is you're the main speaker. I'm just the opening act or closing act. So
Thank you very much for putting that up. We stayed in a hotel across the street from that church,
wow.
which, by
Okay.
the way, is just below the castle of Krakow, which is a very handsome edifice and well worth visiting. What is interesting is I saw no mention of the fact that the castle, which dates back 300 or 400 years, was from 1939 to 1945 the home and offices of Hans Frank, more than Gauleiter. He was the governor of the general government, which was the name given by the Nazi government to that area of Poland, which was not annexed like Silesia, etc., and remained essentially just occupied. And there didn't appear to be any reference to that period when not only Jews, but Polish Catholics suffered enormously. And I think my sister was surprised to hear that she had to share her Jewish history with some Polish history during the time of the Holocaust, and that 3 million Poles lost their lives in what Timothy Snyder calls the Bloodlands. And you probably know that.
Yes.
Because the Polish people themselves got it from the Germans, the Russians, and the Ukrainians. Notice I added and the Ukrainians. There was terrible war between the Polish villages and the Ukrainian villages during the Second World War.
It's complicated, but the Bloodlands is an appropriate a name for it. And the fact that it was a Jewish administrative headquarters, which I'm sorry, German administrative headquarters, which is just extending Krakow's history as administrative headquarters for the Austrians, also Germans, right?
Yeah, it's important to note that Krakow was the capital of Poland much longer than Warsaw had been, I believe.
Yes, you're absolutely correct. And that's one reason why Krakow is such a beautiful city today. It was not destroyed during the war, as opposed to Warsaw, which Hitler wiped off the face of the earth. Everything you see in Old Town Warsaw is reconstructed.
Yeah, reconstructed partly from the paintings of Canaletto, who had painted wonderful scenes of Warsaw's main square and other buildings and streets.
Yeah.
Views from the Vistula, etc. Yeah. I will just add a comment on the Vistula. Krakow's on the Vistula. Krakow is just north of the Carpathians. The Vistula, one of Europe's great rivers, rises in the Carpathians. And by the time it gets just down to the lowlands of Krakow, it's actually quite broad. You know, it's 100 meters broad, 100 yards wide. Then the Vistula carries on, winds its way north, and goes through a town called Płock before it gets to Warsaw, and then continues north and reaches the Baltic Sea, pretty much in a sort of delta around Gdansk or Danzig, I guess. But the little town I mentioned, Płock, is where my grandmother was born. She, as a child, left Płock in about 1892, I think.
Huh. Interesting.
To migrate to London.
Okay. Um, okay, let's see. And nobody's got their hand up, so on we go. Uh, the royal capital city. So a quick a thumbnail of the history of Krakow. Here's where it's located in southern, very much in southern Poland, and that's going to be important in just a second. Why being in southern Poland? Always been a leading cultural center as it is today. UNESCO recognized it quite early, one of the first. Um, and the Polish monarchs favored it beginning in 1038. So that's a long history of being a capital. Um, and so the big thing was the unification of Poland with Lithuania into a commonwealth. And we don't appreciate this enough, but it was the largest and most populated, up in the top two or three at least, for long periods of time, for centuries in Europe. And you can see its size. The other important thing, it was multi-ethnic, and that's going to be important when we get around to talking about Austria. And it had all of Ukraine until around 1650, when there was a break off of Russian nationalism, a very small part of a sliver of Ukraine. And Polish and Latin were the official languages of this commonwealth. So a multi-ethnic cosmopolitan commonwealth. So Krakow, if you look at it on a map, was located in a very strategic part, a choke point. There are some maps I've seen where it's just Krakow here. And this links east-west all the way from Spain, which I'm going to be talking about the next couple of weeks, all the way to Moscow. And I think this building survived. I think it's still on the main square called the Cloth Hall.
Okay, where you just put the arrow, I went up there, up the staircase, onto the parapet there. It's still there. It's a very lively building filled with restaurants down below, underground, all the way up. There's bars at the top. It's yes, it doesn't have the clutter of small buildings that you see there around it. It's a beautiful edifice right in the middle of the old square of Krakow, the market square, which, by the way, is the largest market square in Europe, bigger than Salamanca, bigger than any other. That's what I noted when I was there last week, or the week before last. It's magnificent.
Yeah. I think Aiko would agree. It dominates that square. So Catholicism was the state religion, and when you're talking about trade, you have to have trust. You have to have credit to have trade. So if you have a unified religion like Catholicism, that's pretty good. But that kind of fell apart specifically after Martin Luther. So why were the Jews so prominent in trade? Because they trust each other in different cities. And if you look at what's the French house of banking? He had 5 sons, and he spread them all Rothschilds. He spread them all throughout Europe and Northern Africa, and so there was that. And we encountered that when we were doing the Silk Road, how there were minority groups that would come to dominate trade because they could trust each other on credit, right? You didn't have to carry gold, which was a dangerous thing to do. You could deliver your goods, and you would be paid, and you'd trust that at some point your fellow religionist would compensate you. And that was also one reason why Islam could develop a trade route all the way to Indonesia very, very early. Trust. So the partitions of Poland, and this is why it's important to realize Krakow being in the south was important. The people that lived in the greenish parts, which are the progressive shares that Austro-Hungary had in the partitions, they were the most tolerant and the most benign because the parts of Poland that went to Germans, not so much. And the parts of Poland that went progressively went to Russia over the progressive partitions, also not so much. So if you were lucky to live in Krakow during these partitions, which really began around 1780, I think Catherine the Great was in on the first one. And so this is the partition, the Austro-Hungary share, and this is Krakow with the Polish spelling, and all the other cities. Most of these are now Ukraine. Limburg. What's the current name of Limburg?
That's Lviv, or it was Lvov, and now it's Lviv.
Lviv, yeah.
Which was in Poland and is now in Ukraine.
and when I was touring, I did a tour in 1962 of Russia, and it was a bus tour with German students, German socialists, and it was a brotherhood tour of the Soviet Union. And we came to Lvov, and we were on a bus, and the guide said, "Okay, take a break. Take 15 minutes. There's a park across." So I got off the bus, and I was alone. All the other Germans went in a different direction, and I'm walking through the park, and a woman comes up to me in perfect English and says, "Are you an American?" I guess she could recognize me by my button-down shirt. And she told me that she had innocently come to visit her Polish relatives in 1939. I think it was 39. And while she was visiting, that was when the Russians and the Germans, the communists and the Nazis, decided to divide Poland themselves, following their monarchical forerunners. And so she had gotten caught in that sudden partition. And she said, "Would you deliver a letter for me? Because the Soviets will open and read my letters, and I'm afraid." And I said, "Sure." But that was one person who got caught in a sudden partition in 1939, and so there she was over 20 years, 30 years later, stuck. But she was from Canada, and there are a lot of Ukrainians in Canada to this day. I think their foreign minister was her family had been an immigrant from Ukraine. Canadian foreign minister.
It's interesting, John. It's interesting that the Poles have been so welcoming to Ukrainian refugees. because they have the basis for an argument, even to this day, about their territory, that Lemberg or Lviv was a Polish city, but of course it had a Ukrainian minority. But that's how the borders were readjusted after the Second World War, and they've accepted them.
Yeah, and of course in the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, they were all just equal citizens mixed into a multi-ethnic stew. So there was that base, but of course, over time, the ethnicity reasserted itself. So yeah, so that was the lucky part of Poland in the division. Now here's the unlucky part. The First World War One came, and at the end of World War One, Germany, of course, gave up their control of any part of Poland, and Krakow was a spiritual center for nationalism. As Bob said, the Nazis made Krakow their administrative center. And for that reason, Krakow wasn't bombed because it was there were Germans at work there, and the Jews were forced into a ghetto. Much the same thing happened in Budapest. And the same thing happened in Vilnius. So the Jews were forced into a ghetto, which was basically a staging area until they could get on trains for extermination. When we were in Vilnius, and Bob, I think to know the history of Europe, one of the things you should always do is go to the Jewish Museum. And Aiko and I had an amazing experience in Vilnius at the Jewish Museum. It was a very humble museum. It looked like a World War II barracks someplace. And we walked in, and in the foyer, there was a giant picture of a young woman. And we walked in to say we were seeking entrance, and a woman came to us up to us and pointed to the young woman. This woman, Aiko, she must have been in her 80s, right? She points up to that big picture of a young woman and says, das bin ich, that's me. And she was there to give a seminar on her experience in Vilnius during World War II, which was quite remarkable. She escaped from Vilnius with the help of the Jewish organization within the ghetto. And they identified her as capable and that she should be one of the people to escape. And she did escape, and she went quickly over to the Russian lines, and partisans helped her, and she participated in the liberation of Lithuania from the Germans. And then she went to Poland. No, her relatives went to Poland. Yeah, that was the story. Help me, Aiko, if I'm getting this wrong. Her relatives went to Poland, and at the end of the war, she went to find her relatives and saw the ones who had escaped the camps and had gone to Israel. I'm trying to say, and and some of them had left for Israel before the war. And I think it was that part of the family that she knew must have survived, who went to Israel before the war, and she went to Israel and found them. It was quite a moving story, but the Krakow ghetto, the Vilnius ghetto, the Budapest ghetto. And the Budapest ghetto has an interesting wrinkle I'll get to in just a second. But so, yeah, Krakow was spared. I'm not sure if that is the same building we were talking about before. When I looked at it, I thought it might be the cloth hall. So the great synagogue in Budapest, a very similar story. The Germans went in and set up administrative headquarters in the balcony of the synagogue. And ironically, a lot of the Jews from the surrounding ghetto sought refuge on the ground floor. And so there was this commingling, strange commingling, and that led to the great synagogue surviving the war in spite of the pogrom.
Is that the synagogue that Tony Curtis donated so much money to?
Good, Aiko. And here's Tony Curtis with the Jewish rabbi. So this is the great synagogue right in the middle of the Jewish ghetto in Budapest, and this is the inside that he raised money for. It wasn't until the fall of communism. The communists had no interest in refurbishing a great synagogue, but they didn't destroy it. It sat dilapidated. And when communism fell in 1990s, so in the 1990s, Tony Curtis presented himself to the new Hungarian government in Budapest and said, let's go halvesies and raise money. I'll match any money that you send, or you match any money that I raise, and I forget the details. And together, they both had an interest in refurbishing the great synagogue of Budapest.
Didn't it have also kind of an Islamic look to it? If I remember correctly, it was very beautiful, but it was
Sephardic.
Oh,
Sephardic architecture. I think that was the word they used. So unfortunately, Toby was not able to be here today. She had some things to say, but she mentioned Theresienstadt, which is in Czechoslovakia. And Theresienstadt was meant to be a model concentration camp where they would take a Red Cross for inspections. And in Theresienstadt, there was a composer who, while he was in the concentration camp, wrote an opera called Brundabar, which Berkeley Rep put up, and we went to see it. It was an amazing production in which Hitler it was covertly portrayed as an evil organ grinder. So if you ever see if you ever have the opportunity to see Brundabar, take advantage. So the recovery, we mentioned Pope John Paul. Why? Because he's a native of Krakow as a young theological student. And he was the first non-Italian pope in 455 years. So quite a guy, Krakow, famous son. And here he is with another Pole, Lech Walesa. And of course, the two of them were fiercely anti-communist. And some say Pope John Paul did as much as Reagan in bringing down communism. This was an interesting combination. Castro and Pope John Paul. Castro invited John Paul, both charismatic guys. He invited John Paul to Cuba. So, which led to this famous New Yorker cover, Castro with his AK-47 and Pope with his cross. And I guess that's going to be a pretty good place to end.
Right. John, I know everybody it is the end, but I'll just add that when Pope John Paul II was Bishop of Krakow decades ago, and there was an outbreak of, if you can believe it, anti-Semitism in Poland back in the 60s, I guess it was, he visited that synagogue that I opened my small presentation with, where I was in the cemetery. Behind that is a synagogue. He went to that synagogue to pray with the Jewish community. And that was fairly symbolic and a powerful message back then.
There is hope. And of course, our current Pope is may live up to that. We'll see. We'll see. So final questions.
Yeah, I have a question. Why, did you ever see that map cartoon of Poland? It would go woo, woo, because everybody would swallow it up for a while and then it would be back to itself. But why was Poland such an easy free-for-all?
Well, I think I've heard Ramsey say it's because their nobles were lazy and irresponsible, and they delegated a lot. You know who they delegated collecting taxes to?
The Jews.
So the Polish nobility does not come. I mean, the Polish Commonwealth lasted quite a while, centuries, and America's lasted a couple of centuries.
We hope.
But we don't live in a vast plain, windswept with two great powers, one on either side on each border. So you've got the Germans coming in, you've got the Russians coming in. It's tough to stay independent. Of course, the same goes for Ukraine. I mean, Ukraine itself, right, John, is a word that means borderlands.
Yeah. Yeah.
Hey, John, this is Tom. What's the significance of the cool hat on your head?
Oh, this is, I thought I was going to maybe get to the part of my trip in Spain that was in Galicia. So that'll be next week. You'll see it again next week when I talk about Galicia in northern Spain.
Not to be confused with Galicia as part of the Austro-Hungarian Empire.
Now, the Celts originally came from Austria. So there you go. And so northwestern Spain was their stopping point on the way to Ireland. That's an outrageous thing to say, but I will document it next week.
I've never seen a hat like that before.
Oh. It's Irish.
Oh.
Yeah, it's my Irish hat. My neighbors will recognize it. I wear it to outings. Yeah, well, I'm glad you all.
Yeah, the question that I noticed that when you talk about the Jewish and how they were related in Europe, you got that kind of happening when we were in Borneo, and the Chinese. The Chinese were basically all of the money lenders, and so that's how basically they managed to survive. And it became that was a big deal to how they were able to kind of take over the country.
Well, and if you look at the history of Indonesia, the pogroms against the Chinese, I think a year of living dangerously, I think there's about that. It's risky being a money lender.
Yeah, yeah, but what was interesting at that time of year, the CIA. There's a whole book called the Jakarta Method, and I think we've talked to maybe maybe mentioned that, but it was kind of like Sukarno and um, um, yeah, Sukarno was he had a group of 30 non-aligned nations, as I recall, and these were not in the American camp at all. And ultimately, Suharto, uh, thanks to our U.S. military, was able to overthrow Sukarno, and was happening in the mid '60s, which we were in Borneo at the time, and the so the Dulles brothers, one was the Secretary of the State and one was ran the CIA, and so that's kind of how we got into the Vietnam War, and it's an interesting book. We talk about books. It's called the Jakarta Method.
And I think those of us that remember the 50s, brinksmanship, that was Dulles. Brinksmanship against
Alan Dulles.
John Foster. Allen was head of the CIA,
Right.
and so they worked together, one publicly and one covertly. There's a good book on the Dulles brothers. Okay.
Cool.
Well, I'm heartened. We people have not forgotten, and I have not forgotten everything. At least I could remember what buttons to push. So we'll see you all next week.
Thank you, John.
As Hank Williams said, if the creeks don't rise.
Ciao.
Hi, Homer. Bye, Homer.